Mama! Mama, please! They are hurting me! Mama! The screams shattered the silence of the hospital's private wing at exactly 3:17 a.m., just as they had every night for the past 11 days. They echoed through the corridors like the cries of a tortured soul, so filled with terror and anguish that even the hardened guards stationed at every door flinched at the sound. Nurse Adana Okonkwo was the first to reach the room. She burst through the door to find the scene she had witnessed too many times before, a 7-year-old boy thrashing in his hospital bed, his small body drenched in sweat, his eyes wide open, but seeing something that existed only in the nightmare that had consumed him. Luca! Luca, sweetie, wake up! Adana moved to his bedside, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos. You are safe. You are in the hospital. Nothing is going to hurt you. But Luca Marchetti was beyond hearing. He continued to scream, his tiny hands clawing at invisible attackers, his face contorted with a fear so profound it made Adana's heart crack every time she witnessed it. The door slammed open again, and suddenly the room was filled with men, guards in expensive suits, their hands on their weapons, their eyes scanning for threats that did not exist. And behind them, moving with the controlled fury of a predator who has been awakened to find his territory violated, came Alessandro Marchetti, the Phantom, the man who controlled criminal enterprises across 3 continents. The most feared name whispered in the shadows of power from New York to Naples. And the father of the screaming child. What is happening? His voice was low, dangerous, barely containing the violence that simmered beneath the surface. Why is my son screaming again? What are you people doing to him? Mr. Marchetti, the night terrors are, do not give me the same speech. Alessandro moved to his son's bedside, and for one moment, Adana saw the mask slip, saw the raw, desperate love of a father watching his child suffer. He gathered Luca into his arms, holding the small body against his chest, and slowly, gradually, the screaming began to subside. Papa! Luca's voice was hoarse, confused. Papa! They were hurting me. The shadow people. They were putting things in my head. No one is hurting you, my son. I am here. I will always be here. But they come every night, Papa. When I sleep, they come and the boy's voice broke into sobs. I do not want to sleep anymore. Please do not make me sleep. If you are not already subscribed, you need to stop right now and hit that button. Turn on notifications. Because what this nurse is about to discover will change everything you think you know about this story. Adana had been working at St. Catherine's private hospital for 3 years. She had seen many things in that time. Wealthy patients with secrets they paid fortunes to conceal, politicians recovering from procedures they could not acknowledge publicly, celebrities hiding from the paparazzi while they healed from whatever excess had landed them in medical care. But she had never seen anything like the Marchetti case. Luca had been admitted 12 days ago after collapsing at his private school. The initial diagnosis was exhaustion. The boy had not been sleeping properly, his teachers reported, often falling asleep in class only to wake screaming moments later. His nanny had tried everything: warm milk, bedtime stories, white noise machines, but nothing worked. And then the night terrors had grown worse. By the time Alessandro Marchetti brought his son to St. Catherine's, Luca had not slept more than 30 minutes at a time in over a week. He was hallucinating during waking hours, seeing shadow people who whispered threats and reached for him with hands made of smoke. He had stopped eating, stopped playing, stopped being the child he was supposed to be. The doctors were baffled. Every test came back normal. Brain scans showed no abnormalities. Blood work revealed nothing unusual. Psychological evaluations suggested trauma, but no one could identify a traumatic event that would explain such severe symptoms. The psychiatrists prescribed sedatives, but even the strongest medications only dulled the terrors. They did not stop them. And every night, at almost exactly the same time, Luca would wake screaming. Adana had noticed something on her 3rd night shift with the boy. Something small. Something that might have been coincidence. But she was a nurse who had learned to trust her instincts. And her instincts were telling her that something was very, very wrong. The private wing had been transformed into a fortress since Luca's admission. Armed guards stood at every entrance. Security cameras monitored every hallway. No one entered without explicit permission from Alessandro or his inner circle, and even the hospital's most senior staff were subjected to searches before approaching the boys' room. Alessandro trusted no one. His wife had died 2 years ago under circumstances that remained officially unexplained, though rumors swirled about enemies, assassinations, betrayals from within. Since her death, he had become obsessed with protecting his son, surrounding the boy with layers of security that would make a head of state envious. And yet, despite all that protection, something was hurting Luca. Something no one could see. The sedatives are not working. Dr. Harrison, the attending physician, delivered the news in the morning briefing. We have increased the dosage 3 times, and the night terrors persist. I am recommending a full neurological workup at Johns Hopkins. My son stays here. Alessandro's voice left no room for argument. He is not leaving this building until you figure out what is wrong with him. Mr. Marchetti, with all due respect, we have exhausted our diagnostic capabilities. The specialists at Hopkins might be able to. I said no. Alessandro stood, and every person in the room seemed to shrink slightly. My son is not traveling across the country so that more doctors can tell me they do not know what is happening to him. Find the answer here, or I will find new doctors. The threat was clear, and in Alessandro Marchetti's world, threats were never empty. Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think is causing Luca's night terrors. What could be hidden in that pillow? I want to hear your theories because this story is about to take a turn you never saw coming. That night, Adana began her shift at 11 o'clock. She did her rounds efficiently, checking on the handful of other patients in the private wing before making her way to Luca's room. The guards nodded as she passed. They had grown accustomed to her presence over the past week, and she had earned a reputation for being calm, competent, and utterly devoted to her patients' well-being. Inside the room, Luca was already asleep. His father sat in the chair beside his bed, watching over him with the fierce vigilance of a man who had failed to protect someone he loved before and could not, fail again. Alessandro's eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion, his designer suit wrinkled from days of wearing the same clothes. You should rest, Mr. Marchetti. Adana spoke softly, not wanting to wake the boy. I will be here all night. I will call you immediately if anything changes. I cannot sleep when he is suffering. You cannot help him if you collapse from exhaustion either. Alessandro looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since his son's admission. She saw him taking in her face, her posture, the steady competence in her eyes. You are different from the other nurses. I do not know what you mean. They are afraid of me. You are not. I am afraid for your son. Adana moved to check Luca's monitors, her movements practiced and precise. Fear of you would only distract me from helping him. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Alessandro's exhausted face. My wife used to say something similar. She told me that fear was a luxury she did not have time for. His voice cracked almost imperceptibly. She was the only person who ever spoke to me like a normal man instead of a monster. What happened to her? The question hung in the air between them. Adana knew she was crossing a line, knew that asking such questions of a man like Alessandro Marchetti could be dangerous. But something in his expression invited honesty. She was killed. The words came out flat, stripped of emotion by the years of grief that had numbed them. 2 years ago, someone poisoned her coffee. We never found out who. I am sorry. So am I. Alessandro looked at his sleeping son. She was the only person I ever loved. And now I am watching our child fade away. And there is nothing I can do to stop it. We will find the answer. Adana's voice was fierce with conviction. I promise you that. Alessandro studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and rose from his chair. I will be in the next room. Call me when. I will call you when anything changes. He almost smiled again before walking out, leaving Adana alone with the sleeping boy and the monitors that tracked his fragile vital signs. Subscribe right now. I mean it. Hit that button and turn on notifications. Because what Adana notices next is going to change everything. She noticed it at 2:47 a.m. Adana had been reading a medical journal, keeping one eye on Luca's steady breathing, when she saw it, the first sign that the night terrors were approaching. Luca shifted in his bed. His breathing changed, becoming faster, shallower. His fingers twitched against the sheets. And his head pressed deeper into his pillow. Adana frowned, setting down her journal. She had seen this pattern before, night after night, but now she was watching with different eyes. The terrors always started the same way, with Luca settling deeper into sleep, his head sinking into the plush hospital pillow. And then the screaming would begin. She moved closer, watching the boy's face as the first tremors of distress began to cross his features. His brow furrowed. His lips parted slightly. His small hands began to clench, and his head pressed even harder against the pillow. Adana reached out and, very gently, lifted his head, sliding a rolled towel beneath his neck to keep it elevated. Lucas stirred but did not wake. His breathing remained rapid, his body tense with approaching terror. But something was different. The progression had slowed. Normally, by this point, the screaming would have started. But Luca remained in an uncomfortable sleep, distressed but not yet consumed by the nightmare that usually devoured him. Adana's heart began to pound. Moving with exquisite care, she reached beneath Luca's head and slowly withdrew the pillow, replacing it with a fresh one from the supply closet. Within moments, the boy's breathing began to slow. His hands unclenched. The furrow in his brow smoothed away, and he slept peacefully for the first time in 11 days. Adana stared at the pillow in her hands. It looked identical to every other hospital pillow, white, plush, encased in a sterile cover. There was nothing obviously wrong with it. Nothing that would explain why removing it had immediately calmed a child who had been trapped in escalating night terrors for nearly 2 weeks. Unless there was something inside it. She glanced at the door, knowing that what she was about to do could cost her everything. Her job, her reputation, possibly her life if Alessandro Marchetti decided she had crossed a line. But Luca was sleeping peacefully for the first time since his admission, and every instinct Adana had developed over years of nursing was screaming that this pillow held the answer. She pulled a pair of scissors from her pocket and began to cut. The outer cover came away easily, revealing the white batting inside. Normal. Unremarkable. She felt through the stuffing, searching for anything unusual, her fingers probing every inch of the material. And then she found it. Sewn into the very center of the pillow, concealed within a small fabric pouch, was something that made Adana's blood run cold. 3 things. A small glass vial, empty now but stained with traces of a clear liquid. A photograph, folded and creased, showing a woman who looked hauntingly familiar. And a lock of dark hair, tied with a ribbon the color of blood. The woman in the photograph was Alessandro's wife, Luca's mother, the woman who had been murdered 2 years ago. And the vial. Adana lifted it to her nose and caught the faintest trace of something chemical, something she recognized from her pharmacology training. It was a hallucinogenic compound, something that would be absorbed through the skin over time, causing vivid nightmares and paranoid delusions. Something that would drive its victim slowly, inexorably mad. Someone had been poisoning Luca through his pillow. The same way, perhaps, that someone had poisoned his mother 2 years ago. And whoever it was had access to this room. Had access to the most heavily guarded space in the hospital. Had access to the innermost circle of Alessandro Marchetti's world. Adana carefully placed the evidence in a plastic bag, her hands trembling with the magnitude of what she had discovered. Then she went to wake the most dangerous man in the city and tell him that there was a traitor in his midst. That is the end of part 1, and I need you to subscribe right now. Part 2 is where the hunt for the traitor begins, and you are not going to believe who is behind this. Do not miss it. Alessandro Marchetti did not scream when he saw the evidence. That would have been easier. Screaming, Adana had learned, was a release of emotion, a way of expelling the horror and rage that consumed a person in moments of crisis. What Alessandro did was far more terrifying. He went absolutely still, his eyes fixed on the photograph of his dead wife, on the lock of hair that had been cut from her head, on the vial that had been slowly poisoning his son. And something in his face transformed into an expression that made Adana want to run from the room and never look back. Who else has touched this pillow? His voice was quiet, controlled, deadly. I do not know. I only discovered it an hour ago. I came directly to you. Alessandro looked at her, and for a moment she saw something human beneath the ice, gratitude, perhaps, or recognition of her courage. You should have gone to the police. The police cannot protect your son. And I do not think the police could find whoever did this. Adana held his gaze. You can. Alessandro was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Marco. He spoke to the lieutenant who had been sleeping in the chair outside his room. Wake everyone. I want every person who has had access to Luca's room in the past 2 weeks brought here within the hour. No exceptions. No excuses. Sir, now. Marco disappeared, and Alessandro turned back to Adana. You will stay? I may need your expertise. I am not part of your world, Mr. Marchetti. Tonight you are. His voice left no room for argument. You found what no one else could find. You saw what everyone else missed. That makes you valuable. He paused. And it makes you a target. Adana felt ice spread through her veins. Whoever did this has access to this hospital. Access to my son. They have been watching, waiting, executing a plan that has been in motion for who knows how long. Alessandro's jaw tightened. If they realize you have discovered them, they will try to silence you. Then what do? You stay close to me. You help me find them. And when we do, something dark and ancient flickered in his eyes. You let me handle the rest. Like this video right now, if you can feel the tension building. Hit that button because the interrogations are about to begin and the truth is going to come out. The suspects were assembled in the hospital's private conference room within 45 minutes. Adana watched from a corner of the room as they filed in. Doctors, nurses, guards, administrators, anyone who had been in contact with Luca or had access to his room during his stay. 12 people in total, their faces ranging from confused to terrified. They knew who Alessandro Marchetti was. They knew what he was capable of. And they knew that something had gone very, very wrong. Alessandro stood at the head of the room, flanked by guards whose hands rested on barely concealed weapons. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he looked at each person in turn. 11 days ago, my son was admitted to this hospital. He was suffering from night terrors that no one could explain. Every test was run. Every medication was tried. And still, he screamed every night. He held up the plastic bag containing the evidence Adana had found. This was inside his pillow. A hallucinogenic compound that was being absorbed through his skin every time he laid his head down to sleep. A photograph of his dead mother. A lock of her hair. Gasps echoed through the room. Faces went pale. Someone in this room is responsible. Someone in this room has been torturing my son. And that someone. Alessandro's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. That someone is going to tell me who they are. Right now. Silence. Every person in the room seemed to shrink, trying to disappear into themselves, desperate to prove their innocence through sheer stillness. Alessandro waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. The tension became unbearable. Very well. Alessandro nodded to his guards. We will do this the hard way. Marco, take them one at a time. Start with the nursing staff. The interrogations began. Adana stayed in the room as each suspect was brought before Alessandro, their stories examined, their alibis scrutinized, their every word analyzed for traces of deception. She watched faces crumble under the pressure, watched innocent people weep with fear, watched the guilty truth remain hidden despite hours of questioning. By dawn, they had eliminated 8 of the 12 suspects. Their stories checked out. Their access to Luca's room was limited. They had no connection to Alessandro's enemies or his past. But 4 remained. Dr. Elena Marchetti, Alessandro's cousin, who had been overseeing Luca's psychiatric care since his admission. She had argued vehemently for transferring him to a specialized facility, had pushed for medications that only seemed to make his condition worse, had spent hours alone with the boy during evaluation sessions. Thomas Crane, the hospital's director of security, who had personally approved every person and every item that entered the private wing. A former military man with connections Alessandro's people were still tracing. He had been hired specifically for this assignment 3 months ago. Dr. Harrison, the attending physician who had been unable to diagnose Luca's condition. He had ordered the pillows that were used in the private wing, had access to pharmaceutical supplies, and had a gambling debt that was larger than his annual salary. And Rosa Marchetti, Alessandro's own sister-in-law, the woman who had been caring for Luca since his mother's death. She had been present when the pillow was delivered to the room. She had tucked Luca into bed every night. She had been the last person to touch him before each episode of screaming began. Drop a comment right now and tell me who you think is the traitor. Is it the cousin? The security director? The doctor? Or the woman who has been raising Luca since his mother died? I want to hear your theories. Alessandro's interrogation of Rosa was the hardest to watch. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gentle hands and kind eyes that had seen too much grief. She had been married to Alessandro's older brother, Vincenzo, until his death 5 years ago in what was officially called a car accident. Since then, she had devoted herself to the family, particularly to Luca after his mother's murder. Rosa. Alessandro's voice was heavy with reluctance. You understand why I have to ask you these questions. I understand, Alessandro. Her voice was steady, though tears glistened in her eyes. I would do the same in your position. The pillow that was used to poison. My son, you were there when it was delivered to the room. I was. The hospital provided it. Standard equipment, they said. But you were the one who placed it on his bed. Yes. And you were the one who tucked him in every night. Who was alone with him before the screaming started. Yes. Rosa's voice cracked. Because I love him. Because he is all I have left of Isabella. Because, she stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. Because what? Because I promised her. The night she died. I promised her I would protect Luca. I would love him. I would never let anything happen to him. Rosa looked at Alessandro with eyes full of anguish. And I failed. Someone got to him despite everything I did. And I, Rosa, I would die before I hurt that child, Alessandro. You know me. You have known me for 30 years. I changed your diapers when you were a baby. I held you when you cried at your brother's funeral. I have given everything to this family. Alessandro studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned to Adana. What do you think? Adana was startled by the question. She had not expected to be part of this decision. I think, she hesitated. I think Rosa is telling the truth about loving Luca. But I also think that loving someone does not automatically exclude a person from hurting them. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who believe they are protecting us. Rosa's expression flickered, a momentary crack in her composure that was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Adana noticed it. Rosa. Adana stepped forward, following an instinct she did not fully understand. You said you promised Isabella you would protect Luca. When exactly did you make that promise? The night she died. I told you, but how did you know she was dying? The official reports say her death was unexpected. The poison acted quickly. There should not have been time for deathbed promises. Rosa's face went pale. I meant afterward. At the funeral. I promised at her grave. That is not what you said. You said the night she died. You said you promised her. Adana's voice was quiet but relentless. Were you with Isabella when she died, Rosa? The silence that followed was absolute. Alessandro's expression shifted, a predator sensing weakness in its prey. Rosa. His voice was ice. Were you with my wife when she died? I need to. Answer me. Rosa closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed. The gentle ant facade had crumbled, revealing something harder beneath. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. I was with her when she died. The reports said she was alone, that she was found by the household staff hours after. The reports were wrong. Rosa's voice grew stronger, almost defiant. I was there. I watched her die, and I made her a promise, not to protect Luca, but to avenge her. Alessandro's face went absolutely still. Avenge her against whom? Rosa looked at him, her brother-in-law, the man she had helped raise, the most powerful criminal in the city, and her expression held no fear. Only a cold, terrible certainty. Against you, Alessandro, the man who killed her. Subscribe right now. Turn on notifications. Because part 3 is where the truth comes out, and nothing will ever be the same. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Alessandro stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief that slowly transformed into something more complex. Confusion, denial, and underneath it all, a flicker of fear that Adana had never seen before. I did not kill my wife. His voice was barely a whisper. I loved Isabella more than my own life. I would never. You did not hold the poison yourself. Rosa's voice was bitter now, stripped of all pretense. You were too clever for that. Too careful. But you ordered it done. You decided she had to die. That is insane. Is it? Rosa stepped forward, her gentle facade completely shattered. Isabella found out about the shipment. The one you promised would be your last. The one that was supposed to fund your retirement, your exit from this life. But it was not medicine or electronics like you told her. It was weapons. Weapons that were going to be used in a civil war that would kill thousands of innocent people. Alessandro's face went gray. She confronted you. Rosa continued. The night before she died. She told you she could not live with a man who would trade in death on that scale. She was going to leave you. Going to take Luca and disappear. I tried to stop her. You did stop her. Rosa's voice cracked with grief and rage. You had her killed to protect your precious deal. To keep your exit strategy intact. To make sure no one ever found out what you really are. I did not order her death. I would never. Rosa, I swear to you on my son's life. Your son's life. Rosa laughed bitterly. You think I wanted to hurt Luca? You think I take any pleasure in what I have done to that child? Adana felt her blood turn to ice. You were poisoning him, torturing him with nightmares, making him see his dead mother's face every time he closed his eyes. I was making Alessandro suffer the way I have suffered for 2 years. Rosa's eyes were wild now, tears streaming down her face. I lost everyone. My husband, my nephew, the sister I gained when Isabella married into this family. All of them gone because of Alessandro's ambition, his greed, his willingness to sacrifice anyone and anything for his empire. And you thought the answer was to destroy an innocent child? I thought the answer was to make his father feel powerless. Rosa turned back to Alessandro. You have spent your entire life controlling everything around you, bending people to your will, taking what you want and crushing anyone who gets in your way. But you could not control Luca's nightmares. You could not save him from the terrors I was putting in his head. For the first time in your life, you had to watch someone you love suffer, and know there was nothing you could do about it. Alessandro's hands were shaking. His voice, when he spoke, was barely recognizable. I did not kill Isabella. Liar. I did not. He stopped, closing his eyes, visibly struggling to maintain control. Rosa, listen to me. I know what it looked like. I know what you believe. But you are wrong. Then who killed her? If not you, who? I do not know. The admission seemed to cost him something. I have spent 2 years trying to find out. I have torn apart my organization looking for the traitor. I have, convenient. Rosa's voice dripped with contempt. The great Alessandro Marchetti, who knows everything about everyone, somehow cannot find his own wife's murderer. Because I was looking in the wrong places. Alessandro's eyes snapped open, and Adana saw something new in them. Realization dawning like a terrible sunrise. I assumed the threat came from outside. From my enemies. From rival families who wanted to hurt me. He turned to face Rosa fully, and his expression shifted. But you just told me Isabella found out about the weapons shipment. You told me she confronted me about it. His voice grew cold. How did you know about that conversation? It happened in my private study. No one was there except the two of us. Rosa's face flickered with something that might have been fear. Isabella told me. When? You said she died that night. When would she have had time to tell you about a conversation that happened hours before her death? Unless. Alessandro stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Rosa's face. Unless you were there. In my study. Listening to a conversation you had no business hearing. Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think is really happening. Is Rosa the mastermind? Or is there someone else pulling the strings? I want to hear your theories because the truth is about to come out. The interrogation room had become a crucible. Adana watched as Alessandro circled Rosa like a predator closing in on wounded prey. The guards had moved closer, sensing that something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power. You were spying. On me. Alessandro's voice was deadly quiet. You have been spying on me for years. Listening to conversations. Gathering information. Passing it to someone. I do not know what you are talking about. The weapons shipment was supposed to be secret. Only 3 people knew about it. Me, my contact in the government, and the buyer. Alessandro stopped directly in front of Rosa. How did Isabella find out? Rosa's composure finally cracked. She found documents in your office. Impossible. I never keep documents. Everything is in my head or encrypted on servers she did not have access to. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. Someone told her. Someone who wanted to drive a wedge between us. Someone who knew that Isabella would never accept what I was planning to do. Why would anyone? Because if Isabella left me, if she took Luca and disappeared, it would destroy me. I would be distracted, vulnerable, easy prey for whoever had been waiting for a chance to take everything I built. Alessandro grabbed Rosa's arm, his grip fierce enough to make her wince. Who are you working for? No one. Do not lie to me. His voice rose to a roar. You have been poisoning my son for 11 days. You let me believe you were family while you were destroying the only person left in this world that I love. You do not get to lie to me anymore. Rosa's face crumpled, but not with defeat. With resignation. I never meant to hurt Luca. Her voice was barely audible. The compound in the pillow, it was not supposed to be that strong. Just enough to give him nightmares. Just enough to make you suffer. Who gave it to you? I cannot. Who? Rosa closed her eyes. Your brother. The words fell into silence like stones into deep water. Alessandro released her arm and stepped back, his face a mask of incomprehension. Vincenzo is dead. No. Rosa opened her eyes, and there were tears streaming down her cheeks. He is not. He faked his death 5 years ago to escape you. To escape what you were becoming. He told me you had grown too powerful, too dangerous. That someone had to stop you before you destroyed everyone around you. That is impossible. He survived the car accident. He was badly injured, but he survived. He has been in hiding ever since, building a network to take you down. Rosa's voice was hollow. He was the one who told Isabella about the weapons. He thought she would leave you, take Luca, and he could rebuild his relationship with his family without you in the way. But she did not leave. She confronted you instead. She loved you too much to just disappear. She wanted to give you a chance to change. Rosa's face twisted with grief. And then she died. Vincenzo swore it was not him. He swore he never ordered her death. But someone did, and now he is convinced it was you. Alessandro stood motionless, processing what he had just heard. His brother was alive. His brother had been working against him for years. His brother had been the puppet master behind Rosa's actions, behind Isabella's discovery, behind the slow poisoning of his own nephew. Where is he? I do not know. He contacts me through intermediaries. I have not seen his face since the funeral. Then how do I know you are telling the truth? How do I know this is not another lie? Rosa reached into her pocket, slowly, aware of the guards whose hands were on their weapons, and withdrew a small envelope. He told me to give you this. If everything fell apart, if you found out what I was doing. Alessandro took the envelope and opened it with hands that were not quite steady. Inside was a single photograph. It showed 2 boys, brothers, maybe 8 and 10 years old, standing in front of a small house in the Italian countryside. They were smiling, their arms around each other, frozen in a moment of pure childhood happiness. Written on the back, in handwriting Alessandro clearly recognized, were 4 words, "We need to talk." Like this video right now. Smash that button. Because the final confrontation is coming, and everything is about to change. The meeting was arranged 3 days later. Alessandro insisted on going alone. Despite the protests of his lieutenants, despite the obvious danger, despite everything that logic and survival instinct demanded. He needed to face his brother. He needed to understand what had happened. He needed the truth. Adana should not have been there. But she had refused to leave Luca's side since the revelation of Rosa's betrayal. And when Alessandro asked her to accompany him to the meeting, as a neutral witness, he said, someone who had no stake in the old blood feuds, she had agreed. The warehouse on the outskirts of the city was exactly the kind of place where dangerous men had dangerous conversations. Abandoned, isolated, surrounded by shadows that could hide 100 armed soldiers. Vincenzo Marchetti was waiting inside. He was older than Adana had expected, mid-50s, with gray streaking his dark hair and scars visible on the left side of his face. He walked with a limp, and his eyes held the haunted look of a man who had lost everything and was not sure if he wanted to get it back. Alessandro. His voice was rough and used to speaking. You look like hell. You look like a ghost. Alessandro's voice was ice. Because that is what you have been for 5 years. A ghost, hiding in the shadows while your wife tortures my son. Rosa was not supposed to hurt Luca. She was only supposed to what? Drive me mad watching my child suffer? Make me feel powerless while you waited for the perfect moment to strike. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. I never wanted to hurt you, Alessandro. I wanted to stop you. There is a difference. Is there? Because from where I am standing, you have destroyed everything I love. My wife, my son, my ability to trust anyone in my own family. I did not kill Isabella. Then who did? The question hung in the air between them. Vincenzo was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a folder. Thick, heavy, filled with documents and photographs. 3 months before Isabella died, I discovered that someone in your organization was selling information to the Calabrese family. Names, locations, shipment schedules, everything they would need to destroy you. I know. I found the traitor. I dealt with him. You dealt with a traitor. But there was another. Someone higher up. Someone you never suspected. Vincenzo opened the folder and spread its contents on a dusty table. I have spent 5 years tracking them, piecing together the evidence. And 6 months ago, I finally figured out who it was. Alessandro looked at the documents, his face growing paler with each page he examined. This is not possible. It is not just possible. It is the truth. Vincenzo's voice was heavy with vindication and grief. The person who betrayed you. The person who had Isabella killed when she got too close to the truth. It was not me. It was not an enemy. It was someone you have trusted with your life for 20 years. Alessandro looked up, and his eyes were filled with a horror that Adana had never seen before. Marco, your right hand. Your oldest friend. The man who has been standing at your shoulder since you were teenagers. Vincenzo nodded slowly. He has been working for the Calabrese for over a decade. And when Isabella started asking questions about the weapons shipment, questions that would have exposed his connection to your enemies, he had her killed. Why would he? Money. Power. The promise that when you finally fell, he would be the one to take your place. Vincenzo closed the folder. I have spent 5 years hiding from you because I believed you killed my sister-in-law. Because I believed you had become so corrupted by power that you would destroy anyone who threatened your empire. But I was wrong. Then why poison Luca? Why make me suffer like this? Because I did not know the truth until 3 weeks ago. Because I thought hurting you was justice. Because I was so consumed by my own grief and rage that I could not see clearly. Vincenzo's voice broke. I am sorry, Alessandro. For everything. For the years of hiding. For what Rosa did to Luca. For doubting you when I should have been standing beside you. Alessandro stared at his brother for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Help me find Marco. Help me end this. Vincenzo took his hand and held it. Together. The confrontation with Marco happened at dawn the next day. He never saw it coming. He walked into Alessandro's office expecting a routine briefing and found himself facing both Marchetti brothers. One he had served for 20 years. One he had believed was dead. The evidence was presented. The connections traced. The truth laid bare. Marco denied it at first. Then he tried to bargain. Then, when he realized there was no escape, he told them everything. Isabella had discovered his betrayal by accident, overheard a phone call she was not supposed to hear. He had panicked. He had ordered her death without thinking, without planning, without understanding the consequences. He had spent 2 years watching Alessandro grieve, knowing he was responsible, knowing that every moment of his friend's suffering was his fault. Why did you not run? Alessandro's voice was hollow. You had money, connections. You could have disappeared. Because I did not want to disappear. Marco's voice was bitter. I wanted what you had. The power. The respect. The empire you built. And I was so close to having it all. I just needed a little more time. Time is something you no longer have. The guards moved forward, and Marco was taken away. Not to face the police, but to face the kind of justice that existed in Alessandro Marchetti's world. Justice that was final. And absolute. Subscribe right now if you want to see how this story ends. Because the aftermath is coming, and everything is about to change. 1 month later, Luca was home. The nightmares had stopped completely once the poison pillow was removed. The hallucinogenic compound worked its way out of his system within a week, and slowly, he began to return to the happy, curious child he had been before the ordeal began. He did not remember much of the terrors that had consumed him. The doctors said that was a blessing, that his young mind had protected itself from the worst of what had been done to him. But he remembered Adana. She was there every night. He told his father one evening, as they sat together in the garden of the family estate. When I was scared, when I woke up screaming, she was always there. Alessandro looked across the garden to where Adana was reading beneath a cypress tree, the late afternoon light catching the gold in her dark skin. She had been offered a position at any hospital in the country. Her role in saving the life of Alessandro Marchetti's son had made her famous in medical circles. But she had stayed. She said it was for Luca. Alessandro suspected it was for something more. She saved your life. Alessandro said quietly. Is that why she stays with us? I do not know. Maybe you should ask her. Luca scrambled off his father's lap and ran across the garden, launching himself at Adana with the unself-conscious affection of a child who had found someone he trusted completely. Alessandro watched them together, his son and the woman who had noticed what everyone else missed, who had risked everything to find the truth, who had stood beside him through the darkest days of his life. He had lost so much. His wife, his brother's trust, his oldest friend, who had turned out to be his deepest enemy. But he had gained something too. A second chance. A reminder that even in his world of shadows and blood, there were still people who chose courage over fear. Rosa had been exiled, sent to a convent in the Italian countryside where she would spend the rest of her life in contemplation and penance. Vincenzo had returned to the family, his relationship with Alessandro still fragile but slowly mending. And Marco was gone, erased from history as thoroughly as if he had never existed. That was the way of Alessandro's world. Betrayal was answered with annihilation. But as he watched Adana laugh at something Luca had said, Alessandro found himself wondering if there might be another way. A different kind of strength. A different kind of power. He walked across the garden and sat down beside them. What are you two conspiring about? Luca was telling me about his dream last night. Adana smiled. He dreamed he was flying over the ocean. No monsters. No shadows. Just the sun and the waves and the wind. That sounds like a good dream. It was. Luca leaned against his father's shoulder. I am not scared anymore, Papa. The bad dreams are gone. Alessandro wrapped his arm around his son and looked at Adana over the boy's head. Thank you. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he could not say. For seeing what no one else saw. For finding the truth. For cutting open a pillow in the middle of the night because something felt wrong. Adana smiled. That is just what nurses do. It is what you do, and I will never forget it. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition, a possibility that neither of them was quite ready to name. Papa, Luca tugged at his father's sleeve. Can Adana stay forever? Alessandro looked at the woman who had saved his son, who had helped him find his brother, who had stood beside him through war and revelation and grief. I hope so, he said quietly. I really hope so. Adana did not answer, but the smile on her face said everything. 1 year later, she was still there. Not as a nurse anymore. She had transitioned into a different role, one that involved supporting Luca's recovery and helping Alessandro navigate the complicated process of becoming a better father. A better man. The empire continued. Alessandro could not walk away from everything he had built, could not pretend that decades of choices could be undone with a single decision. But he was changing. Slowly. Carefully. Trying to build something his son could be proud of instead of something his son would have to survive. And every night, when the house was quiet and the guards were at their posts and the world outside had gone dark, Alessandro would check on Luca, not from paranoia, but from love. The boy slept peacefully now. No screams. No terrors. Just the deep, restful sleep of a child who knew he was safe. And sometimes, when Alessandro watched his son sleep, he would think about the woman who had cut open a pillow in the middle of the night because something felt wrong. The woman who had noticed the detail that everyone else missed. The woman who had saved his son's life, and, in doing so, had begun to save his soul. That is the end of this story, and if you made it all the way here, I need you to do 3 things for me. First, hit that like button as hard as you possibly can. This story came from the deepest part of my heart, and your support means everything to me. Second, drop a comment and tell me what this story meant to you. Tell me about the time someone noticed something everyone else missed. Tell me about the nurses, the doctors, the caregivers who saw the details that saved lives. Tell me about the people who trusted their instincts when everyone else told them they were wrong. I read every single comment, and I want to hear your story. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. I have so many more coming, and every single one is designed to touch your heart and stay with you long after it ends. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the very end. Thank you for believing that one small detail can change everything, that courage matters more than comfort, and that even in the darkest worlds, there are still people who choose to do what is right. I will see you in the next one.